right? So what have we got so far? That it's the plane of extreme glamour. It's also, what was the other one? That was the plane of illusion. Okay, the first thing is what? What did it say of it? First, it is a sort of a murky plane of chaos, and it is a plane of reversal, and it's a plane of distortion. And the next thing he says, it's the battlefield. The battlefield, we've just read this wonderful exhortation by the Tibetan. It's also Kurukshetra. The battlefield in India. My friend Philip Lindsay, who's a very good occult historian, he says 4 million years ago, that's when that battle took place. On a plain just south of the present Delhi. Or New Delhi, or Delhi. Yeah. So Kurukshetra, both of humanity and of as a whole, and of the individual human unit, and the two sides were the Pandavas and the Kauravas. That's what it was. The Pandavas were the good guys, and the Kauravas represented matter, form. And that's what the not Bhagavad Gita, but Mahabharata is all about. It is the battleground whereon must be fought the Waterloo of every aspirant. Now, Waterloo was where Wellington defeated Napoleon. In this particular case, Napoleon represented the forces of the ego. He was a Leo, after all. And he got a little bit too full of himself, I think. And the English defeated him there, and that was the unraveling of that empire. We all have to face a Waterloo, which means that the negative aspects of our nature should be defeated in this decisive battle. So if you really look at it, Waterloo and Kurukshetra, these are comparable terms in different ages. Okay. In someone's life there comes an emotional crisis in which decisive action is taken, and the disciple proves his control of his emotional nature. Proves his control. The sign Scorpio is involved in the first, second, and third initiations. It has a peculiar testing potency, and I wouldn't be surprised if in this life that he's talking about, Scorpio is a powerful sign, proving the control of the emotional nature. This may take the form of some great and vital test, covering a brief period of time, but calling forth every resource of wisdom and of purity that the disciple possesses. Or it may be I would call this the first ray method. Or it may be a long and protracted emotional strain, carried over many years of living, but that I call that the second ray method. Yeah. He says that first ray types like decisive, brief actions, and the second ray types stay with the situation very long until it finally resolves. They're stickier. But in the attaining of success and in the achievement of clear vision, which is Sagittarius, and right discernment, through right discrimination, the disciple testifies to his fitness for second initiation. So let's look at those requirements. It is Scorpionic. The sign Scorpio is more associated with the second initiation than any other sign, right? It's Leo with the first initiation, Scorpio with the second, and Capricorn with the third. Those are the associations. Okay. So, clear vision is what we need. We need right discernment, what is right discernment compared to right discrimination? They are not the same thing. These are all requirements of the second initiation. So what is right discernment?
You have discriminated what you're going to do. You discern, you decide what you do what you have decided.
Yes, you have an ability to see clearly your alternatives, what you will do, what you will decide. But right discernment has to do with the detecting of the spiritual values and patterns in the normal situation. You discern spirituality. So it's very interesting. I'm going to point out again one of the charts in Alice Bailey's through right requirements for the second degree. And I think you'll find it interesting where they are located. Now let's see. I don't know why I've lost that. Maybe I made it disappear somehow. But I will come right back to it. Fellowship of Cosmic Fire, AAB diagrams, and right here, I'll go into it here. Okay. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Notice where discrimination and discernment are found, because their relationship is very important. There we go. Here we are again on the mental plane, and take a look. Here is discrimination. Here is spiritual discernment. And something separates them. It's a dotted line. What is that dotted line? Dotted line on the mental plane represents the difference between
mental plane and what's the next?
Well, okay, but this is on the mental plane. All of this is the mental plane.
But it's still called the arch.
Close.
Verse 3, what's the name of it?
Higher mental and lower mental.
Yeah.
And discrimination lies on one side and discernment lies on the other. So discernment, every astrologer should have discernment. You can, let's put it like this. You can separate one thing from another, discrimination, without knowing the meaning of what you're separating. But when you discern, you know the meaning. And you know the difference between what is spiritual and what is material. So, when you're sitting there as an astrologer, you have to discern the spiritual pattern which is trying to emerge through all of these differences of the horoscope. In other words, you're able to see behind and within. That is discernment.
It's the same with any reading or anything. You have to use discernment.
Discernment. Because it means that there's something implicit in the situation which is invisible except if you have spiritual eyes. So spiritual discernment comes on the first subplane, the third subplane of the higher mental plane. And that's the soul power. Whereas discrimination is not a soul power. So think of it, discrimination, the dotted line, discernment. Yes?
Is intuition involved in this? Intuition
must be with discernment.
I would say this. The true intuition is found on the Buddhic plane, but within the soul realm on the higher mental plane, the intuition is reflected. Yes, it is reflected. And if you can discriminate between what is soul and what is personality, begin to see the differences, the intuition is correlated with the number 4. So already the right kind of discrimination leads to accessing the intuition. It can, if you can discriminate properly, it's the beginning of accessing the intuition. The number is correct for that. Okay. Now where are we? Right here. Okay. So I would like to point out that it is this test and crisis through which humanity is now passing. In relation to the second degree, that's a question. Many in humanity may take the second degree. and which began in those conditions which culminated in world war and the present world strain. The first initiation of humanity as an entity took place when individualization became possible. Now, when we talk about the first initiation, we have to be careful. It may be the first kind of initiation that humanity went through, but it's not necessarily the first great monastic initiation, called the birth of the Christ. That's not possible. When individualization took place, you had the birth of humanity. It was an initiation for animal man. But the first monastic initiation, this is shaping up right now with the reappearance of the Christ, and we're told that when he reappears, it will be the sign that humanity has taken the first initiation. Not individualization, which was like the first entry of humanity into being human. That's a kind of initiation. But it's not the birth of the Christ. Even though, in a way, the solar angel put in a part of itself, which is the Christ principle, but it had not come to birth until 21 million years later. Okay. So the first initiation of that kind began at individualization, and the soul was born in the body of humanity. But let's just say, to be born is not to be initiated, it's a necessary precursor. There was no humanity before this point. And it says, this birth of the soul in humanity, let's just call it the birth of the nascent soul in humanity. It was preceded by an interesting period, just like our period right now, only on a lower turn of the spiral. For animal man, this was a huge initiation. A period of fearful stress and strain, dimly sensed by the pioneers into the human kingdom from the ranks of animal men. They were under stress and they were afraid. Okay. And look at us now. We are under stress and we are afraid. In other words, who knows what can emerge now? The world looks like it's losing its values, losing its cohesion. We are being they were about to enter the fourth kingdom, and we, submitted to terrible stress and fear, are about to enter the fifth. It's just a parallel 25 million years later. 21 million, 25.
Stacking up something large then, isn't it? Because for it to be happening again on a higher turn.
Yes, it's a big thing. It's a big thing. Every change of kingdom. Think of it. Now, you can imagine what happens when a master goes into the sixth kingdom. Well, there won't be fear in the usual sense, but it surely will be stress. And some of them don't make it. They have to try again and try again. Should this crisis be successfully passed, the second initiation of humanity will be the result, the passing through the baptism and the entering of the stream. But it doesn't say when. Because right now, what we're really doing is looking for the first initiation of humanity. We're looking for that. Millions may undergo that. But the number undergoing the second will not be so many. So this is puzzling language here, because, there is such a thing as earlier. I talked to you about the earlier initiations, the pre-initiations of humanity, when you become a little bit group conscious, and when you try to be a little bit unselfish. That's an initiation number 1 and initiation number 2, predecessor initiations, before you get to the birth of the Christ. Have I talked to you about that? I'm sure I have. So anyway, he says we will reach the second degree, and some people say, well, when we resolve the Middle East crisis, we will reach the second degree, but I'll tell you what about humanity taking the first degree? That has to come first. So anyway, this is, to me, needs investigation. So the World War from 1914 to 1945 and its resulting effects constitute the Kurukshetra of the world Arjuna, and the outcome is still in the balance. When this was written, this is esoteric, this is a treatise on white magic. World War II had not occurred. Later he calls it World War from 1914 to 1945. But the first phase of World War was 1914 to 1918. And what I want to know is there a third phase? I suppose we all want to know that.
Perhaps it's not been made clear for it because it's a point to ponder.
Yes, and it's unresolved in humanity.
Yes.
Humanity's decisions are not there. But we are getting ready to go through the crisis. It's all about the return of the hierarchy and the Christ. And you know what can happen in your own life when that starts to happen. Everything can fall apart. Pluto and Vulcan, right? As we're told. Now humanity is going through that. So, is the World War really over yet? That's the question. And the way it seems to be shaping up, at least on the mental and astral plane, there's a battle to be fought out on those planes, and it is not over. All right, let this not be forgotten. And here, DK tries for us not to fall into pessimism. He says the outcome of good is inevitable. It is, however, a question of a slow or rapid realization and liberation from the great world illusion. Usually humanity is not known for choosing the wise way, unfortunately. And to this end, every aspirant is begged to work strenuously and lend his aid. Every man, and this is so important, every man who liberates himself, who sees clearly, and who releases himself from the glamour of illusion, aids in the great work. So it all starts with us. We can't go out there and save the world until we do it ourselves. Okay. Again, the astral plane is that whereon the pairs of opposites act and interact, whereon the pull of the great dualities is most potently felt. Dualism on the astral plane. Take a look at Atlantis. It was an astral root race, wasn't it? What was its number? The Atlantean root race was number
3.
4 and 2. It was the fourth race, if you start with the Adamic, Hyperborean, Lemurian, Atlantean, there is the fourth. And if you say, but no, those weren't really men, well, because they weren't individualized, so then you start with Lemuria, and go Lemuria 1, Atlantis 2. Duality, opposite directions, things pulling in contrasting directions. Okay. So the great dualities is most potently felt on the astral plane, which corresponds with Atlantis. Now, many people in the world today are still living in Atlantis, in their consciousness. They are still under the sway of the emotions primarily. Primarily, the interaction is between the soul and its vehicle, matter. The whole personality is matter. But there are many lesser dualities which play their part and are more easily recognized by the average man. High and low, good and bad, north and south, up and down, east and west, all of these dualities. Some of them are neither good nor bad. Some of them have value connected with them. That you can't say it's better to be east than west. You can't say that right is better than left in normal discussion. You cannot say that high is better than low, necessarily. But if you attach high consciousness and low consciousness, then you can say so. If you attach the question of high vibration and low vibration, they're all needed in music, but when you attach it to consciousness, there's a value judgment. And then you can say one is better than another. So there are some dualities that are just like in and out. Is in better than out? Is out better than in? No, in and out, neither one is better. They're both necessary. But when it comes to light and dark applied to consciousness, then we have a value judgment, even though in terms of the contrast they're both needed. Light and darkness interact as do pleasure and pain. Is pleasure better than pain?
I think so.
Well, yeah, except just think of it this way. Too much pleasure brings pain. Sufficient pain brings pleasure. Think of it, the people who go, they call, here's the straight and narrow path. Well, think of it. Here's the straight and narrow path.
Pain brings pleasure?
It sure does, because you discipline yourself.
Oh, I see.
See what I'm saying?
That sort of thing.
That kind of, in other words, here's the straight and narrow path. Oh, it's bread and water. I'm not getting to do all the fun things. And then here's the other people walking down the primrose path. Okay? And at the end of the day, you've taken the bread and water path, and you're at the gate, and you're through the gate, and the primrose path people are still having fun in the primroses. So what's better? See, because it said broad is the way of perdition, narrow is the way of salvation. What's better? It just depends on the context, doesn't it? Ultimately, divine pleasure has to win, ultimately. But what we call pleasure is actually perhaps pain. And what many call pain can be to the ascetic his pleasure. Think about Shiva sitting there, on the lion's skin. He's got the trident. He's conquered the beast. Who wants to live that way? Not many people. But is Shiva happy? Is he experiencing pleasure through all of his conquests? He's happy because he's done the job. Other people say, I couldn't live like that. That's too ascetic. I couldn't possibly do that. But that asceticism has saved him millions of years of submission to the elemental life. So which is better with the pairs of opposites? It all depends on the context. Okay. Good and evil meet and form the playground of the gods. And poverty and riches are offset one against another. Which is better, to be rich or poor? Just in general terms. You know how a lot of money is thrown at studies? Sometimes they spend money on odd things. So they spent money on a research project about happiness. So happiness, and they discovered that those people who were rich, healthy, and young tended to be happier than those who were poor, sick, and old.
How much did that cost?
A lot of money. It was a study, a sincere study. And I suppose, this is when the fifth ray gets crazy. You know what I mean? But the Christ said an interesting thing. He said, the rich and the poor you always have with you. But me you only have for a short time. And Master Moria says, do you think it's better to be rich, he said, in the conventional sense? You do not know the chains of those wretched souls. And imagine that you're poor in the material sense, but you have values. And because you're poor, you have to do things for yourself, and therefore you build your causal body and you learn. And because you're rich, you have servants and they do everything for you, and you don't learn a thing, and your causal body just languishes. Which is better, to be rich or poor? I guess, Master R is very rich. Well, he can make money, you know what I mean? He can make gold or jewels or whatever. You know the story about him. They all had, at his dinners, every place had a fantastic jewel for every guest. You could just make them. Trouble is, they disappeared later. They were what they call apports. So they basically would stay in their shape as long as he wanted them to. People took them home, gone. But he's very rich, okay? As a matter of fact, that's the only way he could get the attention of King Louis XVI and his court. There arrived in Paris a very rich man. Oh, immediately we're interested, right? So then he can get into the court and teach and do what he needs to do. In other words, he had no attachment whatsoever to his riches. It was simply a tool. But is it better to be rich and attached to riches, or poor and not attached to riches, or to one's poverty? I think I know the answer on that one. So it's very relativistic, this question of the pairs of opposites, isn't it? Okay. The modern economic situation is of an astral nature. Selfish, separative desire. It is the outcome of the desire and the result of a certain selfish use of the forces of matter. I want them, you can't have them. Greed. I will have more than enough for me, I don't care what happens to you. Then my desire for matter will be fulfilled. Because without matter, I am not real, because I have no center in me, which I have discovered. I will disappear if I don't hold on to all the things that are not myself. See, this is what's going on, the subtext. I have, therefore I am. You know what I mean? Because I don't know how to find the me in me, so I've got to have, at least there it is, it's not going away. If I have a lot, I am a lot. Now that's got to go. And how does it go? By having your possessions taken away from you. And how is that accomplished? The world is shaping up to accomplish that now. Anyway. So light, all these, they interact. Heat and cold. What's better? Is it better to be hot or cold? Is heat better than cold? Is cold better than heat? See what I mean? Those are opposites to which no value can be attached. It depends on the context. Heat and cold, as we understand the term in a most peculiar manner, are the results of the interplay of the pairs of opposites. That's interesting. And an interesting line of occult study concerns itself with the effect of racial emotions on climatic conditions. Why is it? Are we the way we are because we live in a cold climate? Or is it a cold climate because we are the way we are? So he's hinting at something very interesting. Hot people with hot climates. Colder people or more controlled people with colder climates. This is interesting. We truly make our climate in one significant sense. This is a tantalizing little hint. It goes back to what we were discussing. When desire has burnt itself out, planetary life comes to an end, as climatic conditions will negate form life as we understand it. In other words, let's just say colder people, not hot with desire, colder earth. Totally undesirous people, form life negated. So most of us want something. We keep it alive with our vital force. We want something. But when you've heard it said, well, I'm just cold to that, I'm just indifferent to that, then whatever you're cold or indifferent to, if it had been your responsibility, it just falls apart. It's not going to last because you're not putting any heat into it. This is very interesting stuff what he says. Just about, why all the insects are with us at this time. Having to do with all of our ugly, plenteous thought forms. Increasing the insect peril. We are interacting with our environment all the time. This is occult ecology we're talking about here. Okay.
Does it have to do where we incarnate? I mean, we desire to be in a cold area, or do we decide to be in a warmer area because of how far we have developed?
It may be, and also remember that we incarnate in groups, and the groups have certain qualities. So we're never too far away in incarnating from our group. You could suddenly find yourself as an African bushman or Aboriginal, but it's unlikely. See what I mean? You have groups. There are groups on the inner planes, and you move with those groups. So incarnation is not just an individual matter. There can be big changes for a purpose. But generally the people move together.
Because they are like each other?
As souls they are. Yeah, they have certain qualities. Egoic groups have certain qualities. Now we have to learn about all that. What egoic groups are we with? What rays do they have? What level of development? He says that the countries themselves have the rays they do because they attract to themselves people with certain qualities. So he says, well, why is it that the United States, for instance, has the 2nd and 6th ray soul? It's because of the kind of people that land attracts to it. So it's not just necessarily a free choice. You are attracted on the basis of who you are. So this is question of group identity on the inner planes. Very interesting thing. And one day we will learn with whom we belong and why we are moving with certain people. Now, you can break out of your group, of course. If a person is very, very ambitious, very disciplined, very forging ahead, they reach the point on the edge of their group where they can break in to the lower part of the next group. They can do that. I mean, such a one as the Christ is almost there, and you can break out of the mass with whom you are moving, but most of us don't do that. We move along, maybe a little faster, maybe a little slower, but we're not like those comets that occasionally break free. Okay, in relation to the human unit, the secret of liberation lies in the balancing of the forces and the equilibrizing of the pairs of opposites. Now, that's very important. The path is the narrow line between these pairs, which the aspirant finds and treads, turning neither to the right nor to the left. The ouch reaction, the pain reaction. Too much spirit, it's too hot. Too much matter, it's too cold. It's painful. Pain keeps us on the path. The pain reaction is extremely important because it adjusts, through our sensitivity, the right path and direction for us. Some people who don't feel pain in their body or whatever, they get themselves into terrible situations. They just might watch their arm burn up or be destroyed and not feel a thing. Well, pain keeps your body together because it shows you what to recoil from and so forth. So remember that pain is one of the purposes of Sanat Kumara. The fourth obviously, even fourth-rate people, they look like they have a pained expression on their face, often. I'll show you one of them who's around here, and you see if it's not so. No one here, of course. Okay, so not to the right, not to the left. Pain keeps us in line, and we have to go. What is the Buddha call this? The way we have to go: noble, middle path. No, it's the path of soul. It's the path. It's the path of the one between. The one between comes forth and knows both time and God. It says unity is the one. Unity is the one between comes forth and knows both time and God, but time destroys that middle one, and only being is. So we're in that soul state now. We're moving as souls. Okay. All right. There's a lot of stuff here. I'll give you this, and give it to someone, and they can send it. It must be remembered always that when the pairs of opposites are, there's our word, discerned, when a man balances the forces of his own nature, when he has found the path and become the path, then he can work with the world forces, can preserve the balance and the equilibrium of the energies in the three worlds, and so becomes a co-worker of the master of the wisdom. In other words, DK says, we do not desire for our good company unintelligent fanatics, he says. A fanatic is someone who's emphasizing only one thing and not another. Glamour. You see how we talked about glamour as being distortion? See what a fanatic does? For a fanatic, only one thing, and everything else is discounted. That's glamour. That's distortion. Something is too big. Something else is too little. The world is full of lopsided people who emphasize only one thing. Fanatics. He does give a little bit of excuse. He says sometimes there come certain lives of apparent fanaticism, but what you're doing is you're really balancing something else of a much longer duration, so this huge concentration is needed to balance the other things. Okay. But you know, when you see people who are fanatics, it's not a sign of inner security. You know what I mean? Usually the people who are secure are not overdoing it entirely. If they see only one point of view, the blinding aids of every fanatic divine adventure, there is some fear involved. Fanaticism and fear go together. And look at the world religious situation and you will see that. And it's a fear of not getting to heaven or not getting to paradise or going to hell. This is the cause of the fanatics' overemphasis. Okay. So if we want to become real disciples, we better have balance and equilibrium. Now you have to figure out what that means for you. No one can tell you exactly. It's a peculiar balance in your own case. Let us pray and hope that this may be the practical outcome of our understanding of the nature of the battleground of the astral plane. So that's the first section here, the battleground of the astral plane. You feel that you understand the astral plane as a battleground between the two contrasting forces, the pairs of opposites, the Kurukshetra, the place where everything is a mess, moving into everything else, unclarity, fog, chaos, all of that which has to be cleared up in our own life. Do we understand it? Maybe we live in such a civilized country with nice people that we don't feel that. But I'll just bet if you went to the Middle East and you started to tune in on the astral condition, you'd pick it up pretty fast, I would say. Alright, we just got to move on now. Passing from our consideration of the nature of the astral plane, we will deal with its functions and the relation of the disciple to its activities. Let us remember certain things about it. First, it is preeminently the battleground. And what this means, it is Mars. Mars has for its major ray, what ray? Mars, the ray of Mars? No. Six. The conflict of ideals. Now, I'm not saying Mars doesn't have fourth ray, but the thing about the difference between the fourth ray and the sixth ray is this. The fourth ray wants a win-win situation. It will fight, but then it wants to harmonize with what it's been fighting about. The Mars and the sixth ray just wants to overcome and defeat what it's been fighting with. There's a big difference. Like Alexander the Great, he was hugely ray 1 and ray 4. So when he conquered a people, he didn't just put them down, he assimilated them and became as much like them as they became like him. That was a fourth ray solution. Almost too much. He conquered Persia. What did he do? He dressed up as a Persian king and started to assume their values, fourth ray, to harmonize the two civilizations. So there's a difference in the kind of battle. Okay, astral plane, battleground. And on it is fought the warfare which eventuates in the final release of the imprisoned soul. Well, final release, let's call that, initiation 4. That's final enough. If you are tied to people you hate, if you are tied to people you love, in the form sense, I hate you as a form, I love you as a form, there's no release. If I love you as a soul, I can't hate you as a soul. If I love you as a soul, then there can be release. It's like harmony in music. If you have a real chord that is in tune, the chord flies. It's free chord. Oh, beautiful harmony, listen to that. Then you listen to an out-of-tune chord, and something is in prison in that out-of-tune chord. Maybe you've heard people sing out of tune. It's uncomfortable, you know what I mean? You're sitting there, there's no feeling of freedom. Your own system starts to hurt. And the harmony is beautiful, you're free. It's like that with karma. When we are not in a state of dissonance, and we are not hating and loving the form too much, then we can be free. Fourth initiation. Okay. Okay, it is useful to have in mind the outstanding characteristics of the three planes and the three bodies which function on them. Physical plane is the plane of active experience in and through matter. It is the plane of externalization, and according to the condition and point of development of the inner man, so will be the outer form in its activities. That's pretty obvious. The plane of active experience in and through matter. That's the physical plane. Okay. The astral plane is the plane whereon the man passes through 3 stages of consciousness. Let's see what that is. Number 1A, he gains through his sensory apparatus consciousness in the world of forms and the developed ability to react to those forms with wisdom and intelligence. First, his first reaction is just attraction or repulsion. In other words, DK says it's glamour. He calls it sentiment. I like this. I hate that. That's the first kind of reaction. That is imprisonment, that is reactivity. This consciousness he shares with the animal world, though he goes far beyond them in some respects owing to his possession of a correlating and coordinating mind. So eventually we must react, but we're so sensitive that now we can react with wisdom and intelligence, and that's not how it is at first. People just react. Okay. Point B, sensitivity. You develop sensitivity or awareness of moods. Notice, by the way, this first one seems to connect with your senses. It's the astral plane in relation to the physical senses. Now it's the astral plane in relationship to its own domain, the astral world. Moods, emotions, and feelings, desires, and aspirations, which have roots within him in the principle of self-consciousness, or ahamkara, as the occultist who loves difficult phrases is apt to call it. This he shares in common with his fellow man. Well, moods, it's not necessarily based on what's going on in the world of senses, is it? Something else. When you fall into a mood, why does it happen? When you have emotions, it may be nothing in the outer world at all. Your feelings, your desires, it's in the world of the astral plane itself. So it's your relation to the astral world itself. And now comes your relation to the mind and the higher worlds, but it's also an astral relation. Spiritual awareness or sensitiveness to the spiritual world and the feeling aspect of the higher consciousness. Our feeling in relation to the higher consciousness. When you meditate and you come into higher consciousness, do you have certain feelings when that happens? Are some of these what you might call feelings of well-being? Like, I've just been meditating. Oh, that really felt good, In other words, our astral body has been in contact with something higher and it becomes harmonized and so forth. So that's a lot different from our normal moods and desires, isn't it? But it's definitely a higher astral reaction. So the feeling aspect of the higher consciousness. This has its roots in the soul. Presupposes the dominance of the mental nature and is that faculty which constitutes him a mystic, very sensitive being. Very sensitive. Mystics are very sensitive. They're always feeling out towards the higher worlds. In other words, I'm feeling out after God. That's what we're talking about here. I'm feeling out after the soul. And then I feel wonderful if I touch God, because astrality is about touch. I feel terrible if I can't touch God. Then I'm excommunicated. So the mystic has this going on. The highs and the lows. Okay. So he says there's 3, what did he say here? We're talking about the astral plane we pass through 3 stages of consciousness. And it's very simple. I feel the physical plane, I feel the emotional plane, I feel the mental plane and higher. Those 3 categories. And all the time I'm feeling. Okay? Okay. Spiritual awareness or sensitiveness to the spiritual world, the dominance of the mental nature, this awareness he shares in common with all disciples and is the reward of gained victories of his astral plane experience. Hopefully, we should at least be here. We should be feeling towards the soul. When you meditate, do you get the feel when the soul energies kick in? When it's I'm in the soul space now. He says this is a feeling activity of the astral body. So you get that feeling. Okay. All right, going on. The mental plane comes next. In the right use of the the right use of the intellect is the outstanding achievement. Okay. So we looked at the astral plane and three major approaches of sentiency. By the way, I want to ask you a question, because it's a word that comes up very much. What is sentiency? What is sentiency? This is a word that he prefers to call the astral body the sentient body, actually. What is sentiency?
It's a sort of, it's present, isn't it? It's aware.
Well, we can say various things. Awareness through feeling. Awareness through touch. Awareness through sensitivity. If I am a sentient being, I feel everything going on around me. If I am insentient, I'm a stone. Like that. Okay. So we're becoming more and more sentient all the time. Yeah, it's very connected with the second and sixth rays. Okay. So if we want to be a mystic, we can feel till the cows come home. If we want to be an occultist, we have to develop the mind. So, okay, here is the intellect developing. The intellect is now turned towards the world of the senses. It's called extroversion. The stage wherein the mind is the receiver of the impressions from the outer world via the five senses and the brain. This is a negative condition, and in it, the modifications of the thinking principle are brought about through the impacts of the external world and the reactions of the astral world. So in this early phase of developing the intellect, you are all the time influenced by what's going on in the outer world and what's going on in the emotional world. And what do you do about that? What does the meditator do when the meditator is so affected by everything going on around him? What do you do? In the 8 means of yoga, there is a stage that you have to go through to make sure you are no longer affected by outer things. What is that stage called? What is that stage called? 8. Okay, here we go. 8 means yoga. Here they are. The commandments, or yama, the rules, or niyama, or nijama, posture, or asana, right control of life force, or pranayama, abstraction, or pratyahara, attention, or dharana, meditation, or dhyana, contemplation, or samadhi. Which one of those will help us get out of range of the modifications of the mental nature caused by the external environment and the astral plane? Meditation indicates achievement of that which we want to do. But how did we get quiet enough to meditate?
Abstraction?
Yes, abstraction. In other words, hey, the senses are bothering me. Okay, I'm out of here. Now the senses don't bother me. Oh, the astral world is bothering me. Okay, I'm out of here. I'm no longer vulnerable to those impacts. So I go inside my own inner nature and I become positive to those modifications. And now they can be happening, but I am not affected because I have withdrawn my consciousness. Makes sense, right? Okay. Paying no attention. And instead I start paying attention to the world of the mind and eventually the world of the soul. Alright. Now the next, so that's the early stage. It's called external attention, extroversion, where you are attending to the lower worlds, primarily the physical etheric plane and the astral plane. It's an early stage of extroversion. A lot of people are there. They have no idea that they have an inner self. Where does that inner self begin to be registered? When you look at the unfoldment of the egoic petals, there are 3 tiers of petals. Where do you begin to register that there might be an inner self in that process? You get a choice of 3. In other words, look, there's the hall of ignorance, the hall of learning, the hall of wisdom. Right? So I would say in the hall of ignorance, you don't know you have an inner self. You may know a lot about the world, but you don't know you have an inner self. You can be very skillful, alert, but you've got a totally externalized consciousness. But when you get to the second tier of petals, the pairs of opposites called soul and personality begin to be registered. And people begin to say, well, surely there must be something higher, surely there must be something inner, there's all this, but surely there's something else. And that's a sign. That's a sign that the pairs of opposites are internally being registered. Okay. So, the majority of people in the world are in the hall of ignorance. That doesn't mean they're stupid people, but they're in the hall of ignorance with respect to the soul. They don't know it exists. They don't have any sense of spiritual duality, like I am this and that. It's missing. So we have to, and what happens oftentimes? Crisis in the outer world does what? What does it do along these lines? When you're forced into a crisis.
You go within?
Exactly. You have to, throws you back on yourself. What self? Well, somewhere in me there must be the strength, the knowledge, the wisdom. I've got to be able to handle this. And so you begin to look inside. I've got a higher power. Oh, something is speaking to me. I'm getting advice. Where from? Okay, immediately there's another world. Crisis will do that. So suppose we have a materialistic, outwardly turned humanity at this time.
Take away the resources.
Exactly. Oh, wait. So you take it out of their hands. Now I no longer... You can no longer say I am because I have.
No.
You can say I am because I am. This is different. So we can look, oh my gosh, the world's going into economic this and that, and people are losing this and that, and what will be the effect on the soul?
Gaining.
See, it could be positive if we don't go too far. Obviously, if you destroy the instrument, if you destroy the planet, it goes too far. Then you have to start all over again, which DK said might happen. All over again. To build a humanity which could be a true humanity. He says if humanity doesn't...
What would happen then to all those souls that are reasonably on the path?
A long wait.
A long wait.
In the inner worlds. A long wait.
Oh, I see.
Long wait.
Oh, God.
My old teacher used to say, hey, treat your body with respect. It took you a long time to get one. So, he says, this possibility can be visioned of the destruction of humanity. He says, if humanity does not do these things, it will not survive. And then he adds the words, nor should it. So that's kind of sobering, isn't it? It puts a responsibility... What a responsibility falls on our shoulders. If we know these things, it's not just for us, is it? It's for the illumination of as many people as we can reach with deeper thoughts. Anna-Minna, you had something?
No, I just thought about that you don't have to have a crisis to look inside.
No.
You have a little line with you in this inclination.
Well, yeah, but that's someone like you.
Yeah.
Or someone who's awake, someone who's sensitive. I'm talking about the totally materialistic consciousness who doesn't even think there's anything but what he sees. Just the senses. This is called, it's materialism, basically. Materialism is identification with the object. And materialism is ignorance of the subject. Now, none of us here are materialists. We couldn't stand to be in a course like this if we were materialists. We wouldn't be pursuing what we're doing. This has nothing to do with whether we have money or not money. It's our attitude towards matter. Most of us are idealists, in fact. We're dealing with the archetypes, with the inner and ideal world. And basically, we have to help the world come towards spiritual idealism, don't we? That's not easy. There's some very, very intelligent people who are utterly materialistic. And their intelligence is a defense against breaking the hold of materialism. They can argue you away. What makes you so sure? It could be this, it could be that, it could be something you ate. This is a hallucination, whatever. They find all the reasons why your defense of the inner world is just fantasy. Because they haven't experienced it themselves.
As well, it's, I think, a deep inner fear.
Inner fear.
That would make them turn away. And you would find the people who are fanatically against are often the people who are most afraid.
Most vulnerable and afraid, absolutely. So, DK said it was very important for some to get rid of their fear, because fear can precipitate a terrible crisis. I mean, we need a crisis, but we don't need a crisis so terrible that we are destroyed. And I think the hierarchy is into what you might call crisis management. They know there's going to be a crisis. There has to be a crisis, otherwise we could never turn towards the hierarchy and the Christ. We couldn't, because we're just too outwardly. But the crisis cannot be allowed to be too severe. Otherwise, you've killed the possibility.
But we must remain positive.
Oh, absolutely. Look at the achievement of positivity is the goal of the initiate on the second ray. The achievement of positivity. Positivity to what? Every modification that could take you off the track, right? Remember, you're holding on to the tree in the tsunami. Or you are the tree in the tsunami. Yeah, okay. Anyway, let's just go on because okay, so now the next stage, intellect is dominating now. The mind initiates activity. You're not just, here comes the environment. Oh, yeah, okay. No, now you, the intellect, are initiating activities. Though thrown into activities by the factors above, the senses make your mind do this, the emotions make your mind do that, it is responsive also to the thought currents of the mental plane. This is all about the growth of intellect as well. And becomes exceedingly active as the result of these two contacts. So you go to the university, you get an education. Now your mind is stronger than the senses and your emotions. This is cultivation of the intellect. Your mind is stronger. And I'd say that's true of people like ourselves who are studying these things. Our mind is stronger. Out of these, a third activity supervenes wherein the reasoning principle acts upon the information gained, and in these two ways sets its own streams of thought and formulates its own thought forms as well as registering those of others. So it's sensitivity to others' thoughts, and formulation of our own, with the result of being positive to the lower worlds. We are there now. If we don't have intellect, we don't belong studying this stuff. We have intellect. We can use our mind, and we can discriminate between things, and we can begin to discern spiritual pattern in the middle of everything else. We can do that.
Which leads to intuition.
Yes, we are on the borderland of cultivating the intuition. Root race 6 will be the intuitive root race. Root race 5.5 5.6 is the sub-race or branch race of the abstract mind. Root race 5.5.5 is the purely intellectual group. We are not there. We are not 5.5.5. We are not in the fifth root race, fifth sub-race, fifth branch race. We are in the fifth root race, fifth sub-race, sixth branch race. That's where we're going. And right in the middle of all the heavy materialistic intellect comes the opportunity to be contacting the abstract mind and the intuition. We will not be truly intuitive until the true sixth root race, which begins not too far from now and lasts how many millions years? Sixth root race, a long time. 10 million years, the end of the sixth root race. By then the seventh root race will already have begun, which will be the root race of will and not just the root race of intuition. Will we be around by then? What kind of form will we be in by that time? Well, probably we will be certainly masters of the wisdom, certainly, by that time. Certainly. 10 million years. Better not take that long. And we will probably be helping humanity to understand will and order and law in our new position as intuitive members of the spiritual hierarchy. That's where we're headed. So hang in there, study hard, meditate hard, and persist. Above all, persist, and don't let lesser values take you away from the true path. And, of course, discriminate what are the lesser values. Make a choice, right? Okay, going on. Next and third development of the mind. The stage wherein the soul, through concentration and meditation, here we go, white magic, succeeds in imposing its ideas and impressions on the mind held steady in the light, and so enables the mental body to respond to impressions and contacts emanating from the subjective spiritual world. The solar angel collects himself, scatters not his force, but in meditation deep communicates with his reflection. When the shadow hath responded in meditation deep, the work proceedeth. The lower light is thrown upward, the greater light illuminates the three, and the work of the four proceedeth. The first two rules of white magic right here, in this one. That's where we are. That's what we're doing. To become conscious, skillful creators in the world, serving what needs to be served, serving how we can, serving what needs to be done. All of us. Now, I know there's not one person here, and I include myself, who could not increase the quality and value of his or her service. Every one of us could we not? That's what we've got to really learn how to do. The next 15 years, just target 2025, hold it as an objective. The next 15 years of the last 15 years of the forerunner, and if we ever served in our whole life, ever, this is the time to be as effective in service as we can possibly be. This is it. This is 0 hour now. If you've trained yourself for 10, 20, 30 years in spirituality, one way or another, this is the time to put it out there and make it happen. You believe me, don't you? All I'm doing is reflecting basically what DK says here. Now is the time. Yet the battle par excellence is fought out on the astral body and only reaches its most intense point and its potent fierceness when there is a good physical instrument and a well-equipped mentality. So don't expect the feeble mind or the feeble body to have the biggest fight. Biggest fight comes in a strong personality. The greater the sensitivity of the astral body, and the greater its reactions to the physical world and to the mental condition. And hence, the greater the sensitivity, the greater its reactions to both the physical and mental world, and hence the fact emerges that the disciples and the more highly evolved people of the world have a more potent astral body and work under greater emotional strain than the less highly evolved and liberated sons of God. So increase your stress level. Oh, does that sound... is that appealing? Wait. Increase your stress. Well, there's good stress and bad stress. There's what I would call necessitous stress when you're working under purpose, right? And then there's just the stress of being a nervous wreck when you don't know what you're doing and you don't coordinate yourself. But, suppose you are purposefully carrying a big load and stress arises. Any stress that arises through carrying a greater load is legitimate stress. So you should ask yourself, and so will I, what is the proportion of legitimate stress in my life compared with unnecessary, I know unnecessary stress.
It's really the normal way of things though, because I'm thinking often the youngest and fittest gets sickest when there's a virus.
The
youngest and fittest.
Yes.
And when your chi is very strong, if you take a homeopathic remedy, often you will have a far more violent reaction, healing crisis,
right.
than somebody whose chi is really not up to it.
That's very interesting because, of course, that is an opportunity, isn't it?
It's an opportunity, and it must be the same spiritually.
Yes, to those who have the power, more is laid on them, and the greater the battle. So, remember our old saying about it's better to live the life, do the thing, than to meander feebly down the years. That was, it's such a wake-up call. When we, if we put good stress on ourselves, immediately you begin to feel more fit, more capable. You know what I mean? You can handle more. This is not the stress that comes through lack of integration. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the stress of conforming to inner purpose. And a lot of people, they run away from any kind of stress. But that's not the role of the disciple. Master Moria says, "Burden me still more as I enter the beautiful garden." Still more weight. Burden, well, of course, he's a tremendous first-rate soul, so that's kind of his mantra, but we can all learn from it, can't we? I've always found in my life, when Saturn is sitting at a very critical part of my chart, I take on more. I'm always happy about it, because it means more power, more ability to deal with things. And I chose the right time to do it. Take on more responsibility when Saturn really hits you. And then if you try to run away from it, it'll kill you. If you cooperate with it, you'll be okay. You'll just get strong. So Saturn really is the god of opportunity in that respect. Okay, so now, when DK uses the word beg, it's not, every once in a while he's begging us here. The master is on his knees here, he's begging us. That should mean something. Students are therefore begged to deal drastically and potently with their emotional natures, remembering that victory descends from above and cannot be worked up from below. The soul must govern its instrument in the warfare, and its instrument in the warfare is the consecrated mind. The sacred mind, filled with light, the selfless mind, the mind that's in control, and Scorpio can give you that. Scorpio makes Mercury very strong in these tests of discipleship. Now, we may not be mentally polarized beings yet, because we may not be standing between the second and third initiation, but we can be mentally focused beings. We can be. And that doesn't mean that we lose our astral sensitivity at all. Just as he just said. We can have a very sensitive astral body and still be mentally focused. That's what we need to do. Okay. It is interesting to note the occult sequence and the description given of this plane in the rule under consideration. First of all, it's the plane of dual forces. I'm trying to move ahead so I finish this thing. It's the plane of dual forces. The first thing the aspirant becomes aware of is duality. The little evolved man is aware of synthesis, but is the synthesis of the material nature. Hey, that's all there is. That's it. Just matter. The highly spiritual man is also aware of synthesis, but it is that of the soul whose consciousness is that of unity. He's earned the synthesis. The material man just gets the synthesis because that's where a low-grade consciousness is, doesn't know anything else. The material, the highly developed man has earned his synthesis by passing through duality. And here we are. But in between is the wretched aspirant. I always like when he says the word wretched aspirant. I can identify with it. Now, when you're wretched, it's such an interesting word. It's the feeling you have when you're throwing up. Do you like that feeling? How does it feel? As a matter of fact, what they say is that when you're throwing up, the verb of what you're doing is called retching. That is the word, that is retching. That's about the most uncomfortable feeling you can ever have, isn't it?
Has great results then.
It does. You half want to die, but when it's all over, you feel much better.
Yeah.
So we pass through the stage of wretched aspirant. Here we are. Conscious of duality above all else and pulled hither and thither between the two. His first step has, for its objective, to make him aware of the pairs of opposites and of the necessity to choose between them. Here's Arjuna, and every time you're faced with a choice, look at the strongest planet in Libra. Right? That's the word strongest. Sorry. The strongest planet in Libra is Saturn, the hierarchical ruler and the exalted ruler of Libra, the planet of choice. What does Saturn say? Hey, you can't have your cake and eat it too. If you eat your cake, it's gone. If you have your cake, you can't eat it. So Saturn is the planet of choice. Which way do you go? Okay. Through the light which he has discovered in himself, he becomes aware of the dark. Through the good which attracts him, he sees the evil which is for him the line of least resistance. That's a tough one. Through the activity of pain, he can visualize and become aware of pleasure. And heaven and hell become to him realities. The poet Omar Khayyam says, I myself am my own heaven and hell. You know, these Sufi mystics, they knew something. Yes.
You can speculate on what will happen when Saturn goes into Libra soon.
Here we are. Here we are. The choice. Which way will humanity go? Exactly. Which way will we go? What is the law? What is the karma? Saturn in Libra. Right now. Coming. Through the activity of the attractive life of his soul, he realizes the attraction of matter and of form. In other words, the pairs of opposites become real to him. He feels both of the pairs of opposites. The pull, the counterpull. I was once in my life trying to figure out whether I was going to be a doctor or an opera director. And I went through hell to try to figure that out. And every day my mind would change 5 times. It wasn't my mind at all. It was this. It was my astral body going towards one or another of my objectives. And finally I had to, I don't know whether life chose me or I chose, but I chose opera. Just probably because I had a family and had to support them and I really couldn't go back to school. At least opera made a little bit of money. But there was more in it than that. But you can feel those pulls in your nature. And you can feel, now I know. And then all of a sudden, and the door is swinging back the other way, and oh, now I know.
Sometimes it's pragmatism, though, isn't it?
Finally, if you can get rid of this, you just have to sort of stand in the middle and let something else come in. Okay, so he's forced to recognize the urge and pull of them both. Now, maybe right now in your life, you are not terribly torn right now between the pairs of the opposites. Maybe you've made your choice. It's called the crisis of opportunity, the choice. Later comes something called the crisis of expression. It comes later in your life. So the crisis of opportunity, here's the soul, I'm going with that. Okay, you've taken your opportunity. Maybe 30 years later comes, how can I get this to be real in the world? Maybe you're having a crisis of expression. And if you're over 50 and you're not having a crisis of expression, or you never can remember having a crisis of expression, then you should have a crisis of expression. Try to, like DK says, if you're not having a crisis, why aren't you having a crisis? Why? Okay. He learns to feel himself as pendant, means you're hanging. Pendant between two great forces, and once the dualities are grasped, it dawns on him slowly and surely that the deciding factor in the struggle is his divine will, in contradistinction to his selfish will, father, monad, will, not my will, but thine be done. Thus the dual forces play their part until they are seen as two great streams of divine energy pulling in opposite directions, and he becomes then aware of the two paths mentioned in our rule. The two paths face the solar angel. One path leads back into the dreary land of rebirth. And how many times have we chosen that path? The other leads, here he goes with his imagery, the other leads through the golden gate to the city of free souls. When he speaks in those terms, you get a lift. You feel like, hey, I want to go there, One is therefore involutionary and involves him in deepest matter. The other leads him out of the body nature and makes him eventually aware of his spiritual body through which he can function in the kingdom of the soul. One path later on, when he is a true and pledged Chela, is known to him as the left-hand path, and the other the path of right activity.
So you get another choice later on.
Well, yes, it gets more intense, because you're very powerful at a certain point. It's the second initiation that is the dangerous time. You have power. You are mentally focused. You are spiritually intelligent. You have high ideals. Now, selfishness and selflessness are there. Shall I be great? Because I could be. Or shall I selflessly serve? I always, I like to think of this as the Schweitzer choice. Here's a man who had everything. Everything. Fame, renown, ability, skill, musician, philosopher, organ builder, theologian, everything. And here's Lamborghini. Here's Africa. A huge attraction towards that great personality with everybody saying, gee, Albert, you're great. And here's Lamborghini, medical school, disease, over the age 40, has to live through all this training, go out in the jungle, hardly any help, get to work. Choice. One path leads to enjoying his third initiation just fine, and the other path leads to the fourth initiation. Choice. Saturn in Libra. Here we are. Many of us will be confronted with choices now. They will be determined. On one path, he becomes proficient in black magic, which is only the developed powers of the personality, we all want to develop those, subordinated to the selfish purposes of the man whose motives are those of self-interest and worldly ambition. What did the devil say to Christ? Hey, I offer you the world and the flesh and myself, the devil. Okay, and Christ said, no, no, no. That wasn't Master Jesus in the desert. Or was it? It was both. It was both. Okay, that's the Black Lodge. Intelligent myopia, I call it. These confine him to the three worlds and shut the door which opens onto life. It's not a solar path. It's a lunar path. Back into mind and matter. And when we study our white magic, he says, with the lunar path, the white magician will have nothing to do with that path. On the other path, he subordinates his personality and exercises the magic of the white brotherhood, working always in the light of the soul, with the soul in all forms, and laying no emphasis upon the ambitions of the personal self. Rule 1 for applicants to initiation: if he cares not for the suffering and pain of the lower self, if it is immaterial to him whether happiness comes his way or not, if the sole purpose of his life is to serve and save the race, and if his brother's need is of greater moment to him than his own, then the fire of love is irradiating his being, and the world can warm itself at his feet. So I oftentimes say, okay, if he cares not for the suffering and pain of the lower self, okay, strike out. If it is immaterial to him whether happiness comes his way or not, strike out. If the sole purpose of the only purpose of his life is to serve and save the world, and if his brother's need is for him of greater moment than his own, then he can fulfill the very first rule for applicants to initiation. So is this a tough path we're on or not? But fortunately it's very clear. Fortunately, DK is so crystal clear that you know where you stand and you know how you can assess what you've done and what you have yet to do without getting discouraged, right? It's much better to see your faults than to go on life after life deluding yourself, thinking you are what you are not. It's better to say, oh God, look at that, than it is to say, well, I'm really quite wonderful, everybody tells me I am, I think I must be, and you lose a lot of time thinking you're better than you are. It's better to see it, isn't it? Okay, so that's the solar path. Clear discrimination of these two paths reveals what is called, in some occult books, the narrow razor-edge path which lies between the two. That's your path, your dharma. That's not too much of this, not too much of that. That's keeping your instrument in good shape. That's not burning yourself up in the spirit. Listen, why be righteous? Do not be righteous over much. Why shouldst thou die? You've heard that? Do not be righteous over much. Do not take the right-hand path over much. Why should you kill yourself? Because you'll burn up your instrument. And the other is obvious. Temptation of the lower kind. Okay. This is the noble middle path of the Buddha and marks the fine line of demarcation between the pairs of opposites, and Venus is so important in this path, on this path, because it is not a fanatical path. It's a path of appreciation of the value of form and the value of spirit, both, because you, the soul, are appreciating it. Noble middle path. Okay. All right. And between the two streams which he has learnt to recognize, one going up to the gates of heaven and the other passing down into the nethermost hell. Now most of us go to heaven, in that sense. I don't mean Devachan. I don't mean Devachan between lives. I mean we go to higher and higher planes in our consciousness. Most of us go to heaven, which DK says, this tells you about the extraordinarily successful work of the Great White Lodge, that most people go to heaven. And that's, people like ourselves, unless we really screw up somewhere along the line, we're on our way to the higher dimensions. What we have to avoid, of course, is the testing point of pride, of skill, of higher idealistic desire, which is really selfish. This is called passing the temptations in the desert. You're just out there, you're fasting for 40 days, you're really hungry, And the devil shows up. And he says, hey, you could have all this. You're very skillful, you're very powerful, you could make people worship you, you could have all of this, you could eat. You know, you could hit this rock and it's going to turn into bread. You know, why be hungry? The devil is going to say all these things. It's nothing but our own lunar nature talking. All right, just moving right along here. By the exercise of the two main weapons of the aspirant. I like this. You know, I like weapons. Weapons are good if you know what you're doing with them. Discrimination and dispassion. He gains what is called the vital power. The plane we're on, the vital power must be sought. How does it go? How does this rule begin? The dual forces of the plane we're on, the vital power must be sought, are seen. We see the dual forces. And through discrimination and dispassion. What is discrimination? Knowing how to choose, how to reject what is bad, how to choose what is good. And dispassion. If you're not dispassionate, what happens to you? Have you ever not been dispassionate in your life? If you're dispassionate, you know, suppose you're faced with welling up emotion, but you're a dispassionate person, what will happen? You will hold your ground, right? You won't be swept away. The DK says, you won't be carried away by passion. That's to be dispassionate. He says, never allow yourself to be carried away by passion. I mean, where is away? You know, I love the Chinese saying. They say, Chinese, Ray one country. Never get angry except on purpose. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
It's Ray 1 and Ray 6 together, right? You know, if you want to use anger, use it purposefully, but don't get carried away by your anger, because then you lose your whole center of focus, don't you? All right. So here are your weapons, discrimination and dispassion. He gains the power which is called the vital power.
That is kind of hard.
Yes.
You should not be carried away, because when you go to trial, you have committed a compassionate murder, then you get a lighter sentence. But if you are cold and focused on killing somebody else,
yes, it's much better. If you're going to kill someone, then allow yourself to be carried away. But under other circumstances, then they just call it manslaughter. But if you're going to do deliberate evil, it's far worse than undeliberate evil. But for the disciple, you know how you can be swept and driven up and down the land. You know, here let's look at something that happens to the person before Saturn gets a grip on this person. Up and down the land. Up and down the land. All right. Old commentary, esoteric astrology. Here we go. See if you can relate to this. Amid the whirling forces I stand confused. I know them not, for during all my past they swept me up and down the land. I never could find out what they were. I was being swept up and down the land, wherein I moved, blinded and unaware. From place to place and point to point they drove me up and down the land, and nowhere was there rest. I know them now, the observer, and here I stand and will not move until I know the law which governs all this movement up and down the land. I may resolve, and turning face the many different ways, I face some wide horizons, and yet today I stand. I will determine for myself the way I go. Then onward I will move. I will not travel up and down the land, nor turn in space, but onward I will move. This is so good. It's the difference between living the uncontrolled life and finally taking a stand in spiritual being under Saturn and deciding for yourself, and here comes the tsunami and you stand. Now that is Saturn And if you're ever going to be carried away or swept, I told you the story once. I actually lost my head. I lost my head for about 10 seconds. It was very interesting to walk around my apartment without a head. I was in college, and I was about 20 years old, and I got angry about something. Really angry. And I actually lost my head. I had the feeling for about 10 seconds that I had no head at all. I lost my center. I was swept by violent emotion. It was such a peculiar experience. I was like, where was I? There was no head. And then I came back to myself, and I realized that the outburst had been something else in me. Something came over me. I was swept. I was carried away. I lost my center. Maybe that's happened to you sometime, perhaps. For an Aries person to lose their head, it's a bad thing.
But that happens when you are in a crisis.
In a crisis too?
The very first seconds of the crisis.
Yes, it's interesting, like from what center are you acting, huh? Higher or lower? Yeah, okay. Anyway, the vital power is being found by discrimination and dispassion, just as the eye is the instrument of choice in choosing the way of travel on the physical plane. Shall I go this way or that way? Let me see. And has besides a potency all its own, whereby it attracts and develops its own sign language. So a vital power is felt in the aspirant. This is going to make you a successful magician, when this vital power is felt, because you are not giving up to the elemental forces. You have the power to be vital and to vitalize your thought forms. Okay, all of this is discussed, but I'm not going to do this. This eventually brings the third eye into activity. If you discriminate well enough, choose wisely, if you are dispassionate well enough, you will get the third eye. And if you waste all the energy in elemental expenditure, the third eye will not develop. The pineal gland will not be nourished. The soul will not descend to the top of the head. The ethers will not be fertilized. We will just remain blind unless we discriminate and have dispassion. So, and with the third eye, we actually know where we're going. This eventually brings the third eye into activity, so there is gained a potency and a clear vision, which makes right choice and quick progress upon the way, a steady progression. Choose right in the beginning, get the third eye, and then choose infallibly after that. Yeah. Yes.
The cook doesn't want us to be too late.
Yes. But he starts at 6.
Yeah?
Yes. But we won't be too late. No. We won't be too late. We are told that power is grown and developed in silence. Silence develops the third eye. Silence stops the commotion. Silence helps you choose correctly. And only when he who can find a center of peace within his head, etheric brain, where the paths of the bodily forces and the spiritually inflowing tides meet in the center of the head, can rightly practice true discrimination and that dispassion which brings the controlled astral and mental body under the guidance of the soul. So we're talking about silence builds the vital power, discrimination, dispassion builds the vital power, right expenditure of force builds the vital power. And when we have the vital power, the third eye will open, and then we will always choose correctly, because we will have the third eye, and we will not be the blind leading the blind. In the beginning we have to be that. I'm half blind, and you're totally blind, so, something can happen. But we will no longer be the blind leading the blind. Then he can understand the significance of the vibrating poles and achieve that point of equilibrium, which is the result of their interaction and vibration, equilibrized solar fire between the two, standing in the center. Here's the center. In the edge of the center, right hand path, left hand path, right in the center. The sensing of the dual forces and the clear discrimination of the two paths leads to the development of the vital power. So let's just isolate that. The sensing of the two paths and clear discrimination and dispassion and silence leads to the development of the vital power. So let's just adding dispassion and silence leads to the development of the vital power, an effective vital magician who can energize his thought forms and doesn't just have them die out there because there's no oomph that you can put into them. Okay. This vital power demonstrates its first activity in enabling the aspirant to achieve a point of balance and so stand on the pinnacle of achievement where a choice is made. So the vital power is a stabilizing stance. It's like a constant loop. You develop the vital power which makes choice possible, which makes the vital power possible. It's a positive feedback loop. What is that choice? For the aspirant, it is between rapid and slow progress. We face that choice. Now, for the disciple, accepted and loyal, it is the choice between methods of service. For the initiate, it oft lies betwixt spiritual advancement and the arduous work of staying with the group and working out the plan. Okay, spiritual advancement, shouldering of a staff without a crook to hold. But I could stay with my group. I don't go as fast, but the group goes faster. Working out the plan. Sacrifice. For the master, it is the choice between the 7 paths, and it will therefore be apparent how much more strenuous and difficult is his problem. You know, we say, oh, I wish I could be a master, and the load on him would be like putting the load of a camel, not just on a donkey, but on a gnat, a little bug. That's what it would be like. All, however, prepares the aspirant for right choice through right discrimination, leading to right action, and made possible through practiced dispassion. In this sentence is summed up the technique of the warrior upon the battlefield of the desired plane. Here it is. All, however, prepares the aspirant for right choice through right discrimination, leading to right action, and made possible through practiced dispassion over and over again. It should be noted that in the steadily developing power of choice and the loyally fought battle of the astral plane, the consciousness of the man shifts stage by stage. First, it is the battered, earth-weary aspirant who has to struggle with desire, with glamour, with ambition, and his sensitive emotional body. We've all experienced this. He thinks the battle is stupendous, but from the wider angle it is relatively small, yet all that he can stand. Later, it is the experienced probationary disciple who wrestles in the veil, the valley of illusion, and deals not alone with his own nature, but with the forces of that valley, also recognizing its dual nature. And then the disciple comes forth to battle. First the aspirant, then the probationer, then the disciple. The disciple comes forth to battle and faces with courage and often with clear vision the forces arrayed against him. They involve not only those in his own nature and in those aspects of the astral plane to which he naturally reacts, but they also involve the forces of illusion arrayed against the group of disciples to which he belongs. Let all disciples take note of this and have it in mind in these difficult and strenuous days. Such disciples are in conscious contact at times with their soul forces, and for them there is no defeat or turning back. And finally here, they are the tried warriors, scarred and tried and tired, yet knowing that triumphant victory lies ahead, for the soul is omnipotent, and also, still another step, accepted disciples who battle all the above enumerated forces, plus the black forces arrayed against the elder brothers. They can call upon spiritual energies of their group and at rare and indicated moments upon the master under whom they work, and this is called the stage of Chela on the thread, which we have studied. Thus, the work and labor expands, thus the responsibility and struggle steadily increases, yet at the same time there is also a steadily growing reception of potencies which can be contacted and utilized when they and which, when correctly contacted, ensure the victory. In other words, you have what you need. We're almost there. The phrase, the one who meditates, relates to the soul. You are the soul meditating. Arjuna, the aspiring disciple, resigns the struggle and hands the weapons and reins over to the government of Krishna, the soul, and is rewarded at last by understanding and by a vision of his divine form, which veils the Son of God, who is himself. So that happens in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna shows Arjuna the divine form. It's a wonderful passage. He sees all things as one. And when this battle has been fought and won, the disciple steps into the ranks of the white magicians, in other words, the true initiates of our planet, and can wield forces, cooperate with the plan, command the elementals, and bring order out of chaos. He is no longer immersed in the world illusion, but has risen above it. He can no longer be held down by the chains of his own past habits. He has gained the vital power and stands forth an elder brother. In other words, the vital power belongs to a master. Finally, belongs to a master. Such is the path ahead of all, each and all, who dare to tread it. Such is the opportunity offered to all students who have made their choice with dispassion and are prompted by love and the desire to serve. So you've got to admit, this is a fantastic, rousing call to gain the vital power, to be dispassionate, to make the correct choice, to enter the silence, to gain the power within the head, to open the third eye, to direct our lives forward as white magicians. This is powerful stuff DK is giving to us, and all that remains for us is to understand it and do it. And then to eat again. Go forth to eat. So tomorrow morning at 7:45, we will have a meditation on this rule. And we will see if we've understood it. Okay? See you later. Yeah, he really expects a lot of us, doesn't he?
So boring, isn't it?
But with such writing, how can one not try to do it?
It's fabulous, actually.
It's just, this is a book this is white magic. The control of the astral body. It's fantastic. I never appreciated the book until, having to teach it a bit more. What's in there? Much to ponder on, no? Much to ponder on. And after pondering, to do. Yeah.
I feel a shock of my brain now.